In the quiet town of Watseka, Illinois, the winter of 1877 carried a silence typical of rural life. The rhythm of farms, the toll of church bells, and the hushed flicker of lamps against frost-glazed windows. Yet from this small, unassuming place came a story that would echo across America, unsettling both believers and skeptics. The newspapers called it the Watseka Wonder. To this day, it remains one of the most haunting accounts in American history. It began with a girl. 13-year-old Laurency Venom was, by all accounts, ordinary until the summer when sudden seizures overtook her body. She would faint, collapse into rigid silence, then awaken speaking of visions, of spirits who beckoned her, of realms she claimed existed just beyond the veil of life. Physicians were summoned, but medicine had no answers. Her parents, weary and frightened, turned to what many families of that era did when reason faltered: faith and spiritual counsel. The timing was important. Across America, spiritualism was at its height. Parlors glowed with candlelight as mediums called forth the dead, families sought solace through seances, and newspapers reported each new manifestation with fascination. The question of life after death was not just whispered, it was debated in sermons, in courtrooms, and around hearths. Watseka was no stranger to these currents. Then, in January 1878, Laurency's condition deepened. She began to speak not as herself, but as others. Dozens of voices passed through her, names unfamiliar to the family, until one emerged with startling clarity: Mary Roff. Mary had lived in Watseka years before. Like Laurency, she had been plagued by visions, seizures, and trances. The townsfolk remembered her well, not only for her struggles, but also for her early death in 1865 at the age of 18. And now, 12 years later, Mary's name poured from the lips of a girl who had never known her. When the Roff family visited the Venom household, they were shaken, for Laurency did not greet them as strangers. She rose, arms outstretched, and called them father and mother. She spoke of childhood moments in their home, recalled details of neighbors and objects, even small quirks that had belonged only to Mary. The resemblance in manner was uncanny, her handwriting eerily close. To the Roffs, it felt as though their daughter had returned. At their request, and with the Venom's fragile consent, Laurency came to live in the Roff household. There she became Mary. She tended to Mary's younger siblings with familiarity, strolled through the house with recognition, and spoke gently to her grieving mother as though no time had passed. For 3 months, this life continued. Watseka watched in awe. The town was divided. Some whispered that it was a miracle, proof that the soul could survive death. Others muttered fraud, imagining that suggestion or longing had created the illusion. Physicians called it hysteria, a sickness of nerves and imagination. But the spiritualists seized upon the case, hailing it as one of the most convincing demonstrations of spirit return ever recorded. Pamphlets circulated, lecturers spoke of it in distant cities, and newspapers across the Midwest carried the tale, each report steeped in wonder and suspicion. In the summer of 1878, the spell began to wane. The Mary within Laurency grew quiet, and the girl slowly returned to herself. She left the Roff home, resumed her own life, and lived for decades more, marrying, raising a family, and carrying with her a secret chapter that could never be fully explained. For the Roffs, those 3 months were a balm, a season in which grief lifted and love returned in a form no skeptic could erase. For the Venoms, it was a trial endured, their daughter reclaimed but touched forever by strangeness. For Watseka, it was an event that placed their town upon the map of mysteries. The Watseka Wonder has since been remembered as the first well-documented case of possession in American history. Was it the fragile mind of a girl shaped by suggestion and illness? Was it grief made manifest through shared belief? Or was it something far older, the dead finding a way to walk, for a time, among the living? More than a century later, the questions remain. And as every telling concludes, one silence lingers. The silence between the words Lurency spoke and the soul she claimed to carry.